Yes, 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 yes. 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 All right. Okay, so let's start. Welcome, everybody. Okay. Welcome, friends, new friends, old friends. Everybody's a friend in Cloud Native. Yes, so welcome to, I don't know, this is actually meetup number, I think 28 or 30. Of course, this meetup started, the Cloud Native Kubernetes meetup started many years ago. We stopped for a long time, of course, for force majeure, but now we are back. So I think this is like the fourth meetup in 2022, so of course it's going, this is pretty nice turnout, so thank you for coming. Few forwards, of course, because I need to tell you. So I'm Alessandro, I'm one of the organizers, Mark, Etienne, they are other organizers. You are welcome to help us bring in more cloud native and Kubernetes happiness to the world. So, because if you notice, I'm an ambassador for the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is the foundation, non-profit foundation that manages Kubernetes and many other projects. So, if you want to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find us on meetup.com. You're welcome to participate. So, because this is an official meetup of the Cloud Native Foundation, we respect the code of conduct of the CNCF, which means, of course, like everybody's welcome, nobody should feel unsafe. If you have a problem with anybody, just come find us, and we'll make sure that you feel safe, and this is a place where everybody's welcome and everybody's accepted. So it's very important for us to be inclusive and respect everybody's opinion. So now that said, we are streaming this on YouTube, so we'll find also the recording. What else? We are very active, so we want to organize a meetup every month. I think in October we are already planning one, with not here, but somewhere else. So, by the way, this is the Cloud Pirates. It's a co-working space made by me, but just and a few other friends. So it's a co-working space. If you like the place, you can just contact us. You can come working from here, and we usually host communities, meetups almost every night or as much as we can. And one more thing, in February, we're gonna have an amazing 2 days conference called Kubernetes Community Days in Amsterdam. We are looking for speakers. So just go to cloudnative.amsterdam and you will find the link to the call for paper, to the sponsor prospectus. So if you or your company wants to contribute or just come, I think we're gonna start selling the tickets from the 1st of October. So it's a ticket should be quite cheap, but we'll see. I mean, depends on the economic conditions, but it's a fun 2 days with a barbecue party. It's just a lot of value for your money. So please contact us if you want to, especially if your company wants to sponsor. That's it. Unfortunately, the second speaker had to cancel. It was my fault. I didn't manage the communication very well, but I'm sure Deepu will come back in a later stage to talk about WebAssembly. So don't worry, you will get your WebAssembly dose. And for today, you're just gonna get a lot of cloud native security. So, welcome. If you have any question, and if you want to get on stage and say something and or share your story, we can have lightning talks. We can have just informal gathering and informal meeting. So, I'll give the stage to Ashish, which gracefully came from all the way from
Australia. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate that. By the way, thank you for having me. Thank you. Appreciate that. Woo! I love the energy going up. Woo woo! Thank you. Thanks for the warm welcome as well. So I think as Alessandro mentioned, thank you for having us. We are starting a cloud security meetup over here as well in Amsterdam. So we kind of realized that there's a lot of conversation in cloud security. We done cloud security podcast. This is probably the slide more relevant for this. I've been in the cybersecurity space for 14 years. For the last 7, I've been helping companies get into cloud security themselves, and specifically migrating into cloud or just uplifting their cloud. And for the past 3.5 years, I've been running a podcast with my producer, who's right at the back, called Cloud Security Podcast. And it's literally just called Cloud Security Podcast. That's why you don't see that over there. The intent over there was for us to be able to at least have stories of people doing cloud security from big organizations, small organizations. How did they do it? Like, how does Netflix do it? How does LinkedIn do it? But also at the same time, how does some like a small consulting company doing it? We recently started a series called This Is My Cloud Security Architecture with the intent of democratizing what people should do when they have day one of being a cloud security architect. Literally, I think we have an episode later tonight as well. It's a live stream. Last week, we spoke about how do you start in Azure. Imagine day one in Azure, what am I doing? Like, what am I looking for as a security person, as a guardrail? And then tonight, we're talking about what do I do after I've set up all the guardrails? Do I do CI/CD, not do CI/CD? So definitely check it out. It's on YouTube as well. I love how everything is on YouTube, so all of you technology people as well. For me personally, I'm from Melbourne, Australia, love coffee. I've recently discovered love for Stroop waffle, if I can say it properly. I've had way too many of this. We were at a conference this morning. I think I had at least 4 or 5. Could not stop myself because it grows really well with coffee. So someone should have warned me before I came to Amsterdam, but I've been having way too many of those. So if I talk way too fast, I'll blame Stroop waffle for it. But it's been a really great experience. So today's talk, just so that I go into it, and happy to talk more after this as well. You can keep it as interactive as you want. If you feel you have a question, feel free to stop in between. I wanted to start by leveling up the playing field. I wasn't sure how many people, I think I spoke to a few people, they already work in the cloud security space. Can I get a raise of hands? Are people developers here? I think one DevSecOps person here, but developer, awesome, thank you. Awesome, developer, awesome. So I'm assuming everyone else is security. Oh, everyone else is security. Well, perfect. So we have a good crowd. And the reason, maybe it's a good point to have the lights turned off. Oh, he is back again. Sweet. So I wanted to start by what the current stage is. Like 7 years ago when I started, a lot of conversations, if you ever find a breach, it usually used to be, oh, server misconfiguration, and there's a S3 bucket open in the internet. Nowadays, it's a lot more different. For people who may have seen the Uber breach that happened a couple of days ago, they primarily spoke about someone lost their identity credential. But then if you kind of dug into it, you also realize the hacker also released the AWS account information onto the internet as well. And there was a phishing campaign that was running when the Queen Elizabeth passed away. There's a phishing campaign for people to say, oh, there's this online memo link. You log in with your Office 365 login to access the memo and leave a message for Queen Elizabeth. And I'm going, wait, isn't that your Azure credential as well, like for people who are in the Azure space? So that is kind of a reflection of the scope of some of the breaches being spoken about these days is a lot broader than just saying, oh, I lost my data. You potentially have lost access to your applications as well, which is in Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud. So what are some of the challenges, and why is it that we're still trying to understand this after like, what, 10 years, 11 years of being in cloud? Although still that's considered veteran in cloud for some reason. One of the example, we were talking about Kubernetes earlier, for a few folks over here as well. A lot of people like me who started in IT, we spoke about what traditional IT was on-premise. Four walls, nothing happens outside of it. It's like for people who've been to a tropical country, it's like coconut, hard on the outside, soft on the inside. You can go anywhere once you're inside, but you can't get in. Nowadays, it's more like you have a on-premise environment, you have a cloud, sometimes you're multi-cloud, you have Google Cloud, Azure, AWS, and it's a lot more complex than just simply saying, I'm going to deploy an application. Now it's more like, oh, where are you deploying it? What are you using it for? What data you have? Privacy is important as well, which also means there's different kind of compute for the application you're building. You may have Kubernetes, you may have servers, you may have serverless. For people who may not know, function as service is a thing as well. We were talking about event-based architecture today. Like people are thinking of building not just traditional applications. They want to not manage servers. They don't want to manage firewall. They just want to put their code and the code should just run. I don't care about whether there's a server, 10,000 servers, 11,000 servers. I just want to run my code. I don't care what's running in the background. So we're facilitating for that kind of compute as well. And one of the guests who came on the podcast, he's from a company called Square, which is called Block. It's like a financial company in the US. And he said something about shared responsibility, which is really interesting. He said, shared responsibility means no one's responsible. Like, it's always like, am I responsible? Is it you? I thought it was your thing. So it's always confusing, and it's always interesting when cloud providers always slap that, oh, it's shared responsibility. This is your thing, not my thing. And you're like, but I'm hosting the application on your side. You are the one with the server, but you want me to manage encryption? You could do encryption by default anyways, right? But you want me to charge money for it as well. So there's a confusion around shared responsibility as well, because as the compute became complex and more services came out from the cloud provider, now it's even more blurrier lines between who's actually responsible for what on a service level. And then there's the problem of multi-cloud. I used to be really proud in the beginning of the CISO that I only had AWS in my environment. Then the company grew, started expanding out of London. We started opening an office in New York, EU, and well, we bought a few companies. I think a company that we acquired was in France, and they were primarily in GCP. And we were doing due diligence, and we found that, oh, doing due diligence at Google Cloud. I'm like, yeah, it should be fine. I think, no, it's not that difficult. I'm sure they have G Suite, Google Workspace. We're not thinking they have Google Cloud. We're thinking they have Google Workspace. And first day, we were talking about, what do you guys use? Oh, they use Google Functions. I'm like, fuck, they use Google Functions. Okay, it cannot be that hard. Then I start digging a bit more, and like, oh, they use all these other services from Google Cloud that my team or me have no idea about. I mean, we know AWS, but we don't know anything about Google Cloud. So a lot of people, it was easy for us to kind of start off by saying, I know AWS, I'm really good at it. But now a lot of us being forced to think about, oh, well, I have this business requirement to have Azure or business requirement to have Google Cloud. You need to secure this. But I don't know a fuck about Google Cloud. I don't know anything about this, but sure, I'll protect this for you. But I think, and sorry for the swearing, by the way, it's an Australian thing, so I just apologize in advance. I probably should have started with that warning. That's the challenge. But obviously, also, another confusing part about the industry is that the solutions that are being offered by vendors has also made it even more confusing. And this is kind of probably where the focus of the talk comes in as well, where we have a combination when people started working in, hey, I need a solution for cloud. A lot of people said, oh, I already have a vulnerability management in my on-premise. I should be able to use that in my cloud. Then there was like a confusion where, but how do I translate that into a world of cloud where my servers are not always active? How do I translate that into a world where my IP addresses are not permanent? Because my firewall requires an IP address, but Google Cloud or AWS doesn't give me a permanent IP address unless I fix it, which is probably the anti-pattern in cloud. So there was this huge conflict between, I'm already paying for a vulnerability management software, why do I need to buy a new one for cloud? But even if you decided to buy, or even if you decided not to buy and use the old one, the problem was there was no cloud context. Like there's this whole concept of tagging in most cloud providers these days, where so you can identify what resources are. None of the old school recognized it. And you're going, okay, so how do I, if you ask a question around, how do I know this is for HR business unit, this is for financial, it's like, oh, just use the IP address. I'm like, but there is no IP address. So you want me to fix an IP address in cloud, so almost go down the anti-pattern path so I can make my old tool work for the new world. It's almost like driving a Ferrari with an engine of, I don't know, like a Suzuki or whatever. But it's like very weird way of using cloud, but obviously people wanted to save money, so I can understand. And then each product that you have, or each cloud provider you have, requires their own training. I think we spoke about CCSK just before. Great training for getting the foundations right, but once you start going a bit more specific in a real world context of, I need to secure AWS because service EC2, serverless Lambda, ECS, EKS, that's just one cloud. And most people are specializing in just one of those services. So imagine there are 300 plus services that are there in each cloud service provider, and each year they release more. And it's not just a thing for security, it's also a thing for cloud engineers as well, because they come up with requirements for, oh, we have this new service, we should use it. And they're like, but I don't know how to use it, so I don't even know how to automate, make a pipeline out of it as well. So that has definitely made the solution space quite confusing as well. And now we are also in this battle for open source tools that are being used by cloud providers. I was giving an example earlier where Kubernetes, when it started, there was a huge hype. There was people talking about, oh, you should have self-hosted Kubernetes. I'm going to make a fork of a Google version of Kubernetes and build it myself. Like, great idea, but what happens when the person leaves? And which is exactly what happened with us. We had a person in our team who spent 6 months building a self-hosted version of Kubernetes because he thought it was super cool and we'll be real native, we'll use a cloud version of Google. And oh my God, once he left, we had no idea what to do. It was just this complex world, because for people who, we were just talking again with the Kubernetes world, for people who are coming from a non-cloud native world, Kubernetes is a whole different ballgame. But networking is different, identity is different, pods, it's not even just containers, it's a container orchestration, but in a way, its own way. You have API servers that talk to you, the pods, you don't talk to it directly. If, well, technically you shouldn't talk to it directly. And then there's the root container, not a root container. Like, it's almost like unlearning what you have learned all the years of IT to learn this new thing. So that's why people specialize in Kubernetes, because there is just no way you can remember both sides without confusing yourself. So solution market is also, well, for lack of a better word, fucked. So where does this lead us? Gartner decided, which is a very popular analytics company, they give all the CISOs around the world, this is what you should be looking for in a solution. They normally reference this as a metric to see wherever you're on the quadrant, I want this tool. So they came up with 4 C's for the cloud service providers or solutions. And they said most CISOs should just focus on getting one of these, or at least, well, actually, they didn't say one of these. They just said these are the categories of tools people should look at into a cloud provider. Now, CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Manager, I'm going to go into each one of them as well, but these are the 4 popular ones. There are more coming up. Now people have DSPM as well, Data Security Posture Manager. There's a Kubernetes Security Posture Manager. Now people are just basically taken the cat and stretch it too thin to make their own version of it because people realize it. So why is it that people don't care? People don't care because of the solution things that I mentioned earlier, where I don't know which one do I need. So just quickly, I think, yeah. So I'm going to briefly talk about the CSPM as well. The idea behind CSPM was imagine if you have a house and you're going on a holiday, but you're already halfway. How do you know that your front door is locked? And CSPM is that tool that it's like, imagine if your house was API enabled. It allows you to have a look at whatever service you're running, is it running according to best practice? So in the context of your house, is your house front door locked or not? You can make an API call to lock the door. That's what CSPM is, a Cloud Security Posture Manager. It's to maintain a certain posture in your cloud environment. Doesn't matter what the scale is. It allows you to identify or ongoingly monitor for, it's like, like a house inspection, for lack of a better word. It goes around your house, looks at, oh, you have a window broken, or which is S3 bucket, open the internet, or you have a door open, it's like you have a server facing the internet. So it's things like that what Cloud Security Posture Manager is supposed to do. And there are a lot of people who talk about CSPM. Now, there have been 4 generations of it. There's a YouTube video I made about it because there's too much to talk about, maybe to our scope. But happy to talk more about CSPM as well. CWPP, I spoke about vulnerability management earlier, where people had the old school way of doing vulnerability management. CWPP was the cloud native way of doing vulnerability management. The idea behind this was it can monitor for malware detection, IPS, IDS on servers that you're running in the cloud context. Now, I specifically call out servers because they are meant for servers. They're not meant for functional service or anything else. They're primarily just for servers. And they are different from CSPM because they don't, like for going back to the house example, they don't look at a broken window. CWPP is more like if you have a toaster or a broken appliance in the house and it's going to light your entire house in fire, that's the component that tells you, hey, there's a malware here, you should look into this, or there's an alarm I should raise because there's an appliance not working. So cloud native application protection platform, this was the next maturity that Gartner came up with. They said, well, CSPM is great, CWPP is great, but most of the industry is doing infrastructure as code, or IAC. They're also doing Kubernetes security as well. So what do we do for those categories? So they came up with Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, which is comprising of CSPM, CWPP, IAC security, and Kubernetes security, and whatever else is classified as Cloud Native. So they threw a blanket umbrella on it. Now, funny enough, people said, hey, you haven't covered identity yet. And I'm going, oh, fuck, we'll just make another category for that as well. So we have CIEM, which is Cloud Infrastructure Entitlement Management, because in the cloud context, the industry believes that identity is your most important component or parameter. If you have access to access keys, if you have access to someone's username, password, you potentially have access to their AWS account, Azure account. So identity is the most important thing you can probably control within a cloud environment. So the reason they came up with CIEM was because it wasn't as simple as that I've joined a company, Ashish has so-and-so privilege. It's also, there are 10,000 Ashish versions going around, and cloud has this added complexity of they're not just users like you and I. There are servers that are classified as users in cloud as well. For people who may know AWS, there is this whole concept of instance role, where every server has a role, and it can be an identity, can perform backend functions, even when you're not logged in. And another thing is also they have something called session tokens. I don't know how many know this, but the temporary session tokens that are created by AWS, they are not logged anywhere. You can log the activity. So for example, if I have 2 session tokens, one of them is temporary, it would say I'm doing activity, but I can't see what credentials am I using for the activity because it's a session token that doesn't exist anywhere. So things like that were quite highlighted by people that, hey, managing identity, RBAC, who has overprivileged information was getting really difficult in cloud, especially at the scale that it was being used. So people came up with the idea of we should have CIEM as a category as well. So coming back to why people don't care. For people who have already used an old tool, like a Ferrari with a Suzuki engine, they don't care. They're like, well, I've already got a solution for it. They also don't care because now most of the solutions like your SIEM and your other monitoring tools, they all claim they do CSPM. So now you're almost like this dilemma where, well, I don't need to buy a CSPM tool because I already have my SIEM that can also do CSPM category things. So there's a bit of a confusion there as well. And for people, because now non-security players are now starting to be cybersecurity company as well, because apparently once you start saying cybersecurity, your valuation goes up the roof. So now they have cybersecurity as a component as well. And traditionally, what companies were not known for cybersecurity, they're all doing cybersecurity now. Look at Splunk does it, which is another $1 billion. Salesforce is getting into it as well. I'm going, Salesforce is for sales. I don't know why they need to talk about security, but they are a security company as well. Atlassian is classified as a security company as well. So everyone's trying to up their valuation. Maybe they were trying to go public or whatever the thing may be. But there are a lot of companies which are non-traditionally cybersecurity companies are calling themselves a security company. Now, another thing that was also happening was as these tools started becoming popular, the first version of these tools only looked at compliance standards, which meant that when you have 500, 600 servers, it produces a lot of alerts. How many of them are false positive? How many are relevant? Was super hard. Like imagine if you log into a console and you see 10,000 alerts. You're like, where do I even start with this? 10,000 alerts, which one's relevant? Should I have someone in my team spend 6 months going through all the 10,000 alerts because my CSPM tool is telling me? Or should I just basically ignore this entire thing and focus on new applications? So that's why people stopped caring for CSPM, because a CSPM tool for them was a reminder of the fact that I have 10,000 alerts waiting for me to fix, which I have no idea about. And this information, although relevant for a CISO, was absolutely not relevant for a board member. Imagine as a CISO, when I would go to a board and talk about CSPM, they have no idea what I'm talking about. For them, it's like, well, is this a relevant risk? Not, then I don't care, I just move on. So getting budget was becoming a problem as well, so people didn't stop caring about it. Now, I've kind of spoken about the problem, but I pretty sure I talk about why, when would someone need this and when, what should they use at a particular stage. If you're starting today, and if you just have one AWS account or one Azure tenant, not many services, not many servers, you don't need any of the Cs. I'll be honest, you can get away with just using what your cloud provider gives you. It's more than enough. They give you a compliance standard like CIS you can map yourself against. They even have threat detection capabilities, most of them as well. If you folk are using Microsoft Azure, there's an E5 license that you can, if you already have one, you can use that. They have a lot of security softwares in there as well. Google Cloud has it as well. Where it becomes challenging and where people start thinking about CSPM is when your scale of cloud is just too large to manage by one individual or one cloud service provider. Like we had a scenario where we were using Google Cloud, we had Amazon, we had Azure. I did not have a team that could manage Google Cloud. We had no idea. We didn't even know where to start. So CSPM was a great place where it would give us a baseline to start with. To say, oh, so if you're starting with Google Cloud, these are minimum requirements. Now, that helps us have some kind of a groundwork. Okay, this is where we can learn, or at least start learning about Google Cloud. But CSPM was our first way to go into it because the complexity of the cloud we had just increased so much, so quickly, it did not make possible sense for, like on one end, we are trying to learn DevSecOps, and on the other end, the cloud bubble just keeps increasing. It's like, which one should we focus on was the battle. CSPM was the answer where our team didn't have a skill set to make our own tool. Like, we were not like Netflix. We didn't have a tool set to make our own tool for it. So we decided to go, okay, if I'm going to pay for a solution, and you don't have to go for an expensive CSPM. There's a lot of startups which are local. And if you find this is my hack that I came up with. Instead of going for, I hope this is not going for Palo Alto, it doesn't hate me for it. But imagine like a big company which has a CSPM solution. They're quite expensive usually, and most of us don't have the budget for it. But we don't have the time to make it open source as well. Usually there's a startup option available where you give someone a new opportunity, and they do pretty much at least 60 to 70% of what an expensive CSPM would do. They will do that much for you. So you can definitely find a cheaper version of a CSPM because there are just so many of them now. It became a popular space. Now, CWPP, it's only required if your organization is using servers. Most new startups these days are trying to be more serverless. They're not trying to go, I want to manage servers unless the application requires it to be server. It requires a server, it requires a database, it requires an application. So if you don't have servers, you don't have to worry about CWPP at all. It's not even a relevant thing for you. You probably can get away without having the need for having a IPS IDS solution. Now, if you're from a regulated organization, which requires you to have compliance, requires you to have, I don't know, I'm gonna vomit in my mouth as I said, antivirus. Like, oh, you need antivirus in your servers. It's like, it's effective in a cloud context. Maybe, at least I have opinions about antiviruses in a cloud context. If your servers are going up and down, and it comes back to the original state, does your virus really exist in the new server? Debatable. Happy to talk about it afterwards as well. But CWPP is only for people who are trying to do servers or still interacting with servers. Now, in my organization before, we had a mix of both. We were using serverless, we were using servers, because we went through maturity. We were an organization which is 25 years old, moved into the cloud 6 years ago. As we were moving, we tried the traditional path first. We did DevOps, started doing CloudFormation. Then we transitioned on to Terraform. And then we still had the legacy of CloudFormation, but we didn't want to do anything with it, so we moved to Terraform still. And then we started using, okay, CloudFormation was good for EC2, but now we're starting to use cloud native, so I don't need that anymore. Now, but I don't want to touch that as well. I don't want to spend time and money on it, so we kind of moved on. So that's why we ended up using CSPM and CWPP. We had about over 1,000 servers. There's no way that anyone can keep an eye on it. So CWPP was the obvious answer. We had an old school version. They came up with a new school, cloud-ready, cloud context understanding version. We bought that, and we started using that. So that was our answer to CWPP. And we had a separate CWPP, which is, CSPM. Now, as you can imagine, in the beginning, having your team go to 2 different dashboards is a bit stupid idea to go, oh, if is it a cloud problem or is it my workload problem? Who do I talk to? So we were looking at, before I left, we were looking at CNAP as a way because it was just getting too much. And we were still growing. We were doing IAC as well, infrastructure as code. And so we were at that transition phase where we were maturing on to be more cloud native. So it made sense for us to go ditch CSPM, ditch CWPP, and just go straight to CNAP. Now, one word of caution is the fact that some traditional CSPM still want you to have an agent. Super bad idea. Do not go for an agent. Because we were able to transition from a combination of, from our CSPM to a CNAP solution in a matter of a day, like across thousands of servers. And none of them required an agent. That is what a cloud world should be, where I can make a choice for, I don't know, something today, like Trend Micro. I'm just making examples here. But today I hate Trend Micro. I want Palo Alto, so I go to Palo Alto. Oh, Palo Alto gives me a bad deal. I go back to Trend Micro. I should have the flexibility to do whatever I want. That's what my fully automated house is supposed to be. And that's what, in my mind, is cloud native, where I can change vendors based on whether they give me value or not. Because if people remember the traditional vulnerability management with agents on your server, it's a 6-month project to take it out. Proof of concept is like a 2-month process, because which servers can we do, which servers are free. So that's where I'm so for the agentless model. 100% cloud native definitely works. It makes our security life easy as well, and developers' life easy as well. CIEM, we never got down to that part because we didn't have, it wasn't like the last company that I had, we didn't have that many users. We probably limited the number of people who we gave access to cloud, so it made our conversation easier. But we were getting to a point where we were allowing developers to create resources in cloud as well. So we were at that stage where almost like you have to start thinking about it. What would RBAC look like? What would privilege access look like? But we never got to a point where it was a problem that, oh, Ashish has way too much access, he should not have access. So plus we took some other measures around the fact that we didn't allow for temporary credentials as well. So based on the cloud you work with, you might realize that you may not need CIEM as the first step. It's more when your identity goes so out of control, like you have 500, 600 people logging into cloud and doing all these things and you're getting permission, maybe then you have to consider CIEM. But if you have like, I don't know, 10 people, 10 DevOps people trying to access cloud, you can manage them on your own. You know 10 people by face. You can just go up to them and, hey, are you still using it? You have an alert for if an 11th user is created. So you're kind of covered. It's a different way of thinking. But some people may say that because identity is the most important thing, you should do CIEM first. I think it's debatable. I think it depends on the business. I personally went down the path of CSPM first because we had a small group of people who had access to cloud. So yeah, that's what we ended up going with. I'm going to take a moment to, hopefully, no questions so far. Any questions? Oh yeah, go for it. Yeah. So what they look at is they look at your users across AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. So you know how sometimes you can have single sign-on? You can say, oh, I can single sign-on to AWS, I can single sign-on to Azure. It doesn't show you granular access. I can only say, I'm giving you access to AWS, but I can't say, I'm giving you access to EC2 instance only in AWS. So you can have an IAM role, which is created for it, but then you have these hundreds of IAM roles that you're defining. So what they, at that point, they end up doing is, okay, how do we manage this in a way that I can control that you only have access to these? I'm just going to make 10 roles, and everyone has to group within those 10 roles. But how I'm managing it, like who has RBAC, whether there's enough RBAC, whether there's overprivileged users, is there a star permission somewhere? it gets really complex at a large scale. Like if you have like 1 or 2 AWS accounts, doesn't really make a difference because you can see them easily. But if you have like, I don't know, I think we had about 120 accounts and we had 2 tenants for Azure, and with each one of them having multiple subscriptions as well. Google, the scale of it is insane, man. I think like the number of functions we had running, lambdas, we had about 20,000 lambdas running. I mean, once you start looking at scale, you kind of realize, oh, because initially I was like, I don't need CIM. Like, what are you talking about? I know 10 people who are sitting over here, but these 10 people created 20,000 Lambda functions that I have to manage, which had identity. And it took me some time to find out. So that's why we're looking at CIEM. So it's not in the beginning. You're probably looking at identity that is a user identity and a system identity as well. That's where the value is. It's not for, like, if you were just managing users, nah, you don't need that. Yeah. Hopefully that answers. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, you still lost me on the CNAP.
Oh, perfect.
You explained it twice, and I still can't figure out what you're trying to say.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned it. So CNAP is for people who are trying to do security posture management. Like essentially, I'm going to go back to the house analogy. Do I have a broken window? Is my front door open? All right, so my S3 bucket is open to the internet or my server. It does that. And as well, it tells you, hey, there's an appliance on fire in your house, so a server has a malware in it. It tells you that as well. And it also tells you, I have this fully automated television with a remote desktop that I can access, so just my Kubernetes. I'm just making up an example here. It manages that for you as well. Imagine when you build a house, you have a contract, which is the IAC or infrastructure as code that you write. Oh, my house should be built with 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a Ferrari outside, or whatever you say it. That contract, or IAC as they call it, infrastructure as code, it does security for that as well. It looks at whether you have passwords in your IAC. It looks at if you're basically giving it like a vulnerability in there as well. And it also does the identity part as well. So anything cloud native from a security perspective, it does the usual compliance pieces as well, but it's mainly targeted at people who are trying to be cloud native. Hopefully that answers your question.
Just wait for the microphone. So it kind of subsumes the categories on top of that.
That's right, yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
so
it's a super category more.
it is a super category,
right.
yeah. But I think it's not for everyone though. Like imagine if you're not working in Kubernetes, then why do you need?
Sure.
Yeah,
You don't need a chainsaw every time.
That's right. Yeah, you don't need to come up with like the massive automatic chainsaw every time, but you can start with CSPM and work your way up to it. Because yeah, pretty much it. Yeah, because CNAP is an overkill for people who are not using Kubernetes or not even doing IAC. But if you ask a vendor, they'll just tell you, oh, you need CNAP, because they can charge you more for it because there are all these other services.
Yeah, we know that.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, cool. Any other questions before I move on forward? No, awesome. Cool. All right. So I kind of mentioned the what organization stages already, so maybe I'll skip to the next one. This is more around why should we care about this, as in these categories. We found these categories helpful when we were starting fresh in Google Cloud because we didn't know as a team where should we start. We were going on YouTube and we'll find all these certification videos. It's great to learn about, obviously, I'm not making fun of certification, but it's great to learn about or drink the Kool-Aid for Google Cloud or Azure or AWS, but it doesn't tell you a real world example for where should one start as a company. It doesn't talk about, oh, you should use CIS benchmark as a baseline. Oh, I should have MFA on my root account in AWS. Like, for people who have no idea about a particular cloud, instead of just looking at this plethora of content on YouTube and other places, or even on cloud security podcasts that we run as well, for you to have a sense of direction, I probably would say a tool like CSPM. By the way, you don't have to buy a CSPM tool. Most of the rules that they check against are on their website as well. So you don't have to actively buy a tool. You can go on their website, see what they look for in a Google Cloud category, and you would know, okay, these are the things I should be looking out for. So you don't have to buy a tool to get all the answers. So, like, because we didn't have much budget when we were starting off first, because we had to validate why we need a budget for it. And these are some of the hacks we came up with where, oh, most people tell you what they're looking out for in the rules section. So you can go look at that. You can have open source CSPM as well. If you have the team capability that can automate stuff, has DevOps, can do engineering piece as well, you can make your own open source version, release to the public, come give a talk about it as well. And that to me was a great way to understand and start working in a particular cloud that I had no experience in. So that's why I believe a lot of people should care as well. And then there is the concept of Nowadays, like if you would have spoken to me 5 years ago, I would have said, when was the last time you heard about a vulnerability from Azure or Microsoft or Google or Amazon? In the last 1 year, actually the last 2 years, I've actually changed my analogy now. I don't talk about, have you heard about a vulnerability? In fact, there were 2 vulnerabilities found as announced this morning. One was for Oracle Cloud, where you could get cross-tenant access. Essentially, I could attach a database which was, say, for ABN AMRO onto an ING bank account. Like that's the kind of level of cross-tenant we're talking. And I'm going, wow, and that was discovered this morning. They've fixed it. Another one was discovered in Azure, where they were giving out access keys to people for requesting a service. So my faith in the cloud service provider has completely gone down now. So now I'm actually one of those people like, do you trust the cloud service provider? Because they clearly were not due diligent. Like if you were to talk to a cloud service provider like Amazon, if you go to one of their annual AWS reInvent conference, they would tell you that, oh, our security team is the hardest. They did not let us do anything, but they had about at least 10 vulnerabilities announced in the last 1 year. And I'll leave a link I've been maintaining a GitHub repo for you guys, you can have a look at as well. I've been trying to maintain a repo of all the vulnerabilities that have been announced so far, because I use that as a use case to go, well, this was there. Yes, you fixed it, but I can't trust that you would do the right thing. So I use that as an information to tell my team members, this is the reason why you need to be questioning it. Because what used to happen is developers would ask us, but when was the last time you heard about an Amazon vulnerability? Why do you don't trust it? I'm like, well, now I have a repository to point at, and I just had the entire list. So that's why I kind of do that. And I won't say they're bad. They're definitely better than a lot of our data centers because you at least have a lot more transparency. If there's a vulnerability that comes out, you know there are thousands of people being affected, so it has to be fixed. If something happens to your data center, I don't know how quickly they would fix it. Like, yeah, just like 1 of 100, man. Like, don't really care. But for Amazon, Microsoft, Google Cloud, it's like 1 of thousands and tens of thousands. So they have to fix it. So I would probably still rely on them more than our data centers. So I wouldn't go back still, but I still would have my guard up when I'm talking to a cloud service provider. Now, another reason why I feel you should care is what the CSPM, CWPP, and CNAP, what the C acronyms are doing. They favor Gartner more because obviously they are talking about tools, solutions, but what they're focusing is more on the short-term, more reactive approach. For people in the DevSecOps space who know that developers are still the most important people, I still believe they are most important people because they're the ones developing the application. They're probably the best people to do threat modeling of an application as well. And all these tools, what they do is they just point at the wrong things. They don't tell you, oh, I need to be able to create a Jira ticket or some kind of a ticketing system so I can make it a pull request back into a GitHub or Bitbucket so we can resolve this because we were writing infrastructure as code. They don't talk about that. What they focus is on, you have this problem right now. Like alert, 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 fix it, fix it, fix it. Which is probably a bad way to look at cloud. And this is probably why security people get bad repo in cloud because, oh, you're not friendly. You're trying to be always this vulnerability, of that vulnerability. Why can't you be more like us? Build more. And this is one of the reasons I feel where the marketing that's been done behind this is pretty bad from a perspective of it's made us even more sensitive to, oh, this vulnerability is active right now. Like I spoke about 10,000 alerts earlier. What the first version of people were doing was they would send those entire 10,000 to developers. And I'm going, what the? Can you imagine? Like you have building an application, suddenly get a Slack message from a security person, you have 10,000 alerts, you need to fix them right now. You have not done any review of it. And by the time you go through it, you spend so much time on it, like, oh, there are only 2 relevant ones, which probably should have just matter of, if someone would have spent the time for it, they would have realized it. So the reason I bring this up and why should you care is there is a place for CSPM and all these C tools, CNAME tools, but it may not be relevant for your organization based on where your organization is at the moment. So you should care from a perspective of what not to do as well, where don't become this ambulance chasers every time that suddenly there's like an alert comes out, or we have to fix this right away. Nowadays, the CSPM tools have also realized it, that people like me are bitching about them. So what they do now is they have more context on the 10,000 alerts. They would now say that, oh, you have 10,000 alerts, but there are these 4 attack paths you should focus on now. So then it's a more relevant conversation. But it still doesn't come back to, like, I think for people, I don't know if people know AWS Reinforce, which is like a security conference by Amazon. Probably the only cloud security conference out, which is run by a vendor. There's another one called Forward CloudSec that's run by community. But the only other cloud provider doing a conference is AWS Reinforce. Amazon runs it. And the keynote was by the CISO of Amazon, Steve Schmidt. And within the first 15 minutes, he basically came out and said, developers, we need to have a champions program, security champions program for cloud. He said it outright. For the first 15 minutes, there's a lady from a popular company. She spoke about how they've been running a cloud security champion program for the last 2 years, how it's been beneficial for the company. So we've come a whole circle. Hopefully we don't give this name DevSecOps, find another name for it. But essentially, we've come back to the same spot where we start with DevOps in the cloud space as well. Where now cloud security is also realizing, actually, we've been becoming way too much of an ambulance chaser. We should definitely take a step back and start talking to developers about this as well. So that's also where it's important. And another problem you would find, which is the last point over there, is the applications. So your posture manager, all these tools, they tend to throw a wide net. They try and measure you against a generic industry standard. Some standards may apply. I mean, if you're not a health organization and you're not in the US, HIPAA may not apply to you, but they have HIPAA as an offering. I'm like, well, I don't want that offering, but I'm still going to get charged for it. So it's like they're going to throw a wide net, so you get probably, have to pay extra for that sometimes, but it may not be the right information for your organization. So going in with your eyes open is probably a better idea as well. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover, and just in time as well. Oh yeah, go for it, man. Yeah. Yeah. So, so the reason, the example I was giving earlier about we had to build our capability, the reason we did that was because eventually in the long run, what you find is the CSPM tool, it's only as good as the operator. Like, it would give me a list of CIS benchmark, but not all of the CIS benchmark is relevant for my organization. Like the HIPAA example that I gave earlier, I'm not a health tech, but I have 10,000 alerts for a HIPAA notification. Should I, I think a person who does not know anything about Google Cloud, which is what we did not, we were like, maybe we should look at this. Maybe something is relevant here. So there was no thinking behind the fact that, oh, is this applicable or not? We're just basically drinking the Kool-Aid. We're going, oh, CSPM has told me it's the wrong thing, so it's the wrong thing. Building a capability internally, like having these conversations, makes you realize, actually, it doesn't really matter if I HIPAA, because I know from a context, we are not a health tech. I don't need a HIPAA. HIPAA is probably not the best example. A better example is something like your, encryption. It's a perfect one. Now, by default, encryption by default could be done by cloud service provider. But they don't do it. They don't talk about it. They can totally just have it enabled by default. We don't have to actively have a policy to say, you should encrypt everywhere. They are the ones providing the service. They can just do the thing. Anyways, that conversation aside, as your capability, your CSPM tool may not tell you this, but your organization policy says you should have encryption everywhere. And if you don't have internal capability to learn about cloud security, that how are you going to apply it to a cloud service provider when there is no option to check for it? That's where it's important to develop that capability internally. Because a tool would not cater for a new service unless they have an API ready. Some tool gets announced yesterday, and then your CSPM tool or CNAP tool would say, oh, we need at least 6 months before we can make this available to you. But in the meanwhile, applications have been developed. How do you secure that? So if you don't have capability internally, then you're basically lost. Do you wait for 6 months for something to happen? So that's where, in the long run, I think it definitely works in the favor of the company to develop capability internally. Plus, it also means that when you talk about it at meetups, you can talk about from a context, oh, we work in cloud, we have capability to support cloud security learning as well. So more people who want to learn about cloud security would want to apply for jobs as well. Because if you don't have capability internally and it's all managed services, then you're like, well, I should just work for managed services instead of working for the company. So from a brand perspective, it definitely one of the reasons why Netflix got popular is because they made all their cloud security tools open source. They don't use it themselves anymore, but because they've matured from beyond it. They actually are probably one of the examples where they can't use a CNAP tool. The scale is just too big. They're talking petabytes of data coming in. And no cloud native tool that can do petabytes of data. So they make their own tools for the kind of data they have, like to the point they've gone so mature, their security team has data engineers in them. Like there's just so much data coming through for them. Like imagine every time you load a movie, the same movie is being loaded by so many people around the globe as well. I think they have about 600 API services that kick off every time you click on like, oh, I want to watch Hitman or whatever the movie is. It's like 600 plus APIs are kicking off at that same time, but then multiplied by number of people watching the same movie. It's insane. The scale is just like, you talk to them going, yeah, I don't know, I didn't even know how they do it. And funny enough, their cloud security team is 12 people for Netflix. Right? So, but they're able to do it because automation, like that purely open automation. And as they mature through each tool, they make it open source so others can use it because they realize that majority of the industry that's going into cloud now, they would have the same problems that they had, but they might not be using it anymore, but others can benefit from it. So, for people who may be interested, it's called Simian Army, S-I-M-I-A-N, Netflix Simian Army. They have a whole GitHub page dedicated to it, and you can find all the tools over there. Yeah, they had a CIEM before CIEM was a thing, right? So you can imagine that's the level of advancement. So I used to talk about, they have I think the identity tool is called Loom, I think. The animal names is very much, like the Simian Army is a gorilla, is like the logo, easy to find out. And they were all talking about chaos engineering, like, oh, they were the ones who said, we should not have servers running 24/7. They had this thing called Chaos Monkey. Well, what it would do is it just go around your AWS account, switch off services randomly. You don't know which service is going to switch off, it's going to switch off service. Yeah, in production. And it's going, oh, like, wait, so people like don't prepare for this. But they were working at that scale because they just cannot risk it. So a lot of people still don't get to that kind of maturity even now where I can randomly switch off a production server and I would not get a phone call from a CEO saying, what the fuck is going on over here, right? So that, I mean, that's kind of weird. So internal capability, 100% supportive of it. It makes 100% sense in the long term. And especially for people who may be trying to get into leadership position, you find that it's a lot more easier in the long term for, I want to get like a budget approval kind of conversation. Easier to talk about, I want someone internally in the team for it because we don't want to keep paying, because the tools are going to get expensive. They're not going to get cheaper. In the long term, it always works out if you already have someone with the skill set in the team as well. So hopefully that answered your question. Awesome, no problem. Any other follow-up questions from anyone? Sweet. That's the GitHub page I was talking about. We've been collecting all the, so this is a tweet from today actually for the 2 vulnerabilities that were announced from the Oracle Cloud and Azure. And yeah, we've been maintaining a list of all the vulnerabilities that have been announced by security researchers in AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Oracle Cloud, also that are affecting multiple cloud providers, because as they have started using open source, if you find a vulnerability in one open source, and there's a service for it in all 3 cloud service providers, you're potentially vulnerable. Like Log4j affected all 3 cloud service providers. Weirdly enough, I don't know how many people worked in the AWS space around that time, but what we found was that one of our servers started crashing, and we couldn't figure out why it was crashing. It was just like the server memory would shoot up to 100%, and just like, why is this happening? And then as we dug into it, we were doing some observability logging, and we find out that what AWS did was they had some services that they were running to check for Log4j if there's still a Log4j library in there. And I'm like, oh, and we had to kill the service ourselves, but there are things like that that they're doing themselves. You almost make me even question even more how they're doing security when they have a script running on your server in the background without telling you that we have a script running in the background for Log4j. But I'll leave that for you to discover more. But any questions from anyone else before I kind of hand it off to Mr. Mark? You giving a talk?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, pizza.
So,
but thank you so much for having me. Appreciate that. Thank you.
thank you so much. Let's take a break because the food is here. So
Ooh.
not only pizza.
Bon appetit.
Yes. So, and if you stick around, we'll have also a short one from Mark. But for now, thank you, Ashish.
Thank you.
Thank you. And stick around. You can get drinks from the fridge, and the food is over there. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
is running Kubernetes, I suppose, because this, after all, is the Kubernetes. So give it up to. We're still streaming, so great. Give it up to Mark. Thank you, Mark. Would you mind using the microphone if you don't mind? Okay. So, hello everybody. So I came in here not knowing that I was going to do a presentation, but I want to give you all some of my Kubernetes success story. So basically, I thought it would be fitting, well, we went very into depth into cloud security, and I thought it would be fitting for me to share my, basically the problems that I faced with using Kubernetes, and basically how I solved them, and maybe someone can learn from it, and I hope I can help someone in this process. So, what I'm going to talk to you today about is basically a startup that I found, and basically I made a lot of mistakes setting up this startup, and recently I've improved a lot, and I hope some of the people are also here having their own projects, basically setting up with Kubernetes, and can have some valuable lessons from this. So yeah, so to give some context, who am I? I'm a colleague of, so I work at Microsoft, and I worked the last 4 years at various startups, and I'm a contributor of Kubernetes. That's an open source project. That is, well, it is an organization that's very open source project, and one of these open source, for example, event handling framework, and Flash Swagger generator, and some more that you probably some of you find interesting. And I found, there's a spelling mistake, but that should be. I'm a part of Altair. It's a digital marketplace for investing algorithms, and basically this company I founded in the past 2 years, and I just work on my spare time on it, and yeah, I use Kubernetes in there, and I want to share with you what the mistakes that I made. So this is the platform. Is it showing? It's not. It's frozen. Oh yeah, it's gone. So basically, this is just a snippet of the platform, and basically the gist of it is that you can register invest algorithms, and basically we take care of the order scaling, and investors can buy these investing algorithms, and then they execute the order for them, basically, and that's it. So here comes the big problem, like the mistake that I made in creating this platform. So the first, so to give some idea of the old architecture, it was a Microsoft architecture, mainly Python and Java-based services. I used plain Kubernetes deployment files, so no fancy frameworks, nothing, just plain Kubernetes. Also in deployment, I just used the kubectl. So there's nothing fancy here. It was multi-repo approach, so I had all the services in different repos, and yeah, so no infrastructure at all, just all distributed. Even I had different repos for the deployments. It was an all a huge mess, and of course no infrastructure as code tools. Everything was basically in bashing GitHub pipelines. So this was the context of how the architecture was. And yeah, probably this was all big newbie mistakes, but I just went with it, and it worked in the end. So to give some idea how bad it was, so many deployment repos. So you must understand, like a lot of service repos. So in repo the service, however, also many deployment repos. So if I had a development environment, production environment, for each environment I had multiple deployment repos where all had the resources orchestrated post phase I needed to add, and the more organization I needed to add, like it was a huge mess. Also, yeah, this is how bare bones it was. I actually redeployed whenever I created a service, so I went to the whole CI/CD. I just deployed with kubectl restarts. It worked. It actually worked quite nice, but of course this is just giving you an idea how bad it was. To keep in mind it was my own project, so a lot of learning was needed, and yeah, this was just giving you an idea how bad the actual deployment to production was, or any other environment. Also, one big problem that I faced was local so I had a microservice architecture. Local development, basically on my own local machine, was super slow. The main reason for that was because when I made a change to a service, having these multi-repos approach, I pushed it to the repository, and then all the CI/CD went into play, and then I had to wait until all the whole pipeline completed, then I had to pull them, and yeah, every change that you make, for example, if you have 8 or 10 services, you change 2, you need to wait 20 minutes. And yeah, that was just not usable, but it was functional for the time being. But you can already see what kind of problems I was facing. So yeah, so this was the main outlines of all the problems that I had. And basically then I went to a new architecture. And I was actually discussing this with Alessandro. So yeah, we wanted to look how we did this in Kubernetes and how we could improve this local architecture and have also a better way of development. So the first thing that has changed, instead of like a multi-repo approach, I went to a mono-repo approach. I know this is a very opinionated subject. I don't want to start any discussion, but I really like mono-repos. So I put everything in one repo, so you can see that the platform basically had infrastructure, the pipelines, and the server, all my services lived. And this allowed me to better organize everything. This also aligns with easier deployment of Kubernetes that I will touch on later. But especially people that face like a multi-repo approach, they probably would benefit from a mono-repo approach if they have the same problems as me. Also, a small topic was I changed I refactored everything from Bash to actually infrastructure as code tool, such as Terraform. Was really nice. I also, yeah, just a tip. I think for 2 years now we have workspaces, so a lot of people use, I think, Terra Grunt. I think that's the name. Basically, you have similar functionality, however, it goes way deeper, but workspaces is really nice if you want to use that. short success story about Kubernetes, and yeah, are there any questions? My team, so basically it's 2 people. So I'm one of them. Basically, I'm the one actively working on it. So basically, Altair is like a project that we started as a result of a startup competition that we won when I was still in university. And yeah, this idea of this, I was always developing the investment framework. There's an open source project that's used by, it's quite popular by a lot of people. And then I was thinking, hey, how easy is to share these algorithms with people that like investors? Very easy. And this was the base of the idea of Altair. Basically, we won the competition with that, so I started competition at the university, and then I just took the development for now close to 2 years, and then that's and recently we factored that in. Yeah, that question. Yes. Because we're talking about that security also, how much of a problem is it that there were a lot of APIs in the presentation? Oh, that was actually yeah, that was the old Docker Compose deployment. So actually, not so bad, but not as bad as that. So we now generate these API keys in DevOps pipelines and yeah, deploy them with Helm. So we actually set values in Helm. It's still not the safest approach, but it's better than it was. But yeah, still, I could learn a lot from the previous presentation. But yeah, of course, to be honest, like security is in this stage of the project like an afterthought, and hopefully, yeah, we will manage that. Any more questions? That's question? No? All right. Well, thank you, Mark. I know that. This one. Sorry. Anything specific on how you manage your accounts? So you have like one, two. Yes. So basically, yeah, I know I could generalize a lot in my services. So it would be nice if I had one Helm template for all my services and then probably reuse it. The reason why I need multiple Helm charts, so as we can see here, so they have a service almost in the Helm chart with the conflicts. It's just yeah, ease of use. So basically that. I did like very specific values for the Helm charts, and I didn't want to have like each value file. So that's why I gave every service its own Helm chart. Basically that was the reason. But I'm open for like suggestions. If there's of course better approaches, but this was the main reason for it. Awesome. Thank you, Matt. I know that you overcome fear of stage fear, so that's good. You win the token of your speaker. It's just really thinking. And you can be next. I mean, of course, like you can present at the meetup. It's very, as you can tell, it's a chill environment. We don't judge, so it's a great place to learn. And well, from MCHAR, the next step is RGCD talks. So Peter also volunteered for a short talk because really needs to deploy on MCHAR when you have Argo, right? So cybersecurity in. It's a closed environment, and the teacher and the students work on that environment. Many of you, who knows about Capture the Flag as a competition thing? Okay. This is what we're building. We're building Capture the Flag events for students. And it's a hard thing to do. So sorry about the Dutch. But, it's a hard thing to do, and that's why we need to join forces. And we're joining forces with Utrecht, Den Haag, Groningen, Winsheim, Fontys, all of them. They're all in our project. And we made some prototypes already. And I wanted to fast forward to the right one, and I can show this event MIA. Because we don't really care about how that stuff works. The point is, it's going to look something like this. Arcade Giant Range now is actually operational right now. We're building it out for students, but also special versions of this for individual schools. And what else can I do? Yeah. So the idea is that each class of students is a separate tenant. So what in fact I'm doing is building a cyber range as a service. So suddenly I'm a cloud provider, and that brings with us a lot of interesting questions and options. So the work I'm presenting is basically done by my students. So if anything is, if I say anything stupid, it's my fault. If there's anything smart in there, it's their job. And I hope you end up ROC because that was one of the more interesting innovations. And let me just tell you somebody who did the bad and the ugly that what we uncovered. So the core, so the technical model really, we hosted on a bunch of Kubernetes clusters. We have one CTFD instance per tenant, so which is basically one course. And that CTFD tenant is a set of containers, and each course basically gets its own Kubernetes namespace. And then there's some additional containers that are for live challenges. So if I want to do this challenge, spins up container or subcontainers, and you get access to your own set of containers, and you can sort of connect that. And that kind of works, but there's stuff to still do. I can tell you what to do in the web and get rid of that as well. Local development environment, interesting stuff. You can actually see how that works on, oh sorry, this is the wrong one. Where's my, it's skipping the one that I want to see, where is it? Where's my mouse? Demo effect, right? Okay. Yeah, so Dr. John Cyber range level now, and the lab scope there is public for everybody. You can have a look at that. And there's a bunch of steps in the workflow for challenge builders to get this going locally. This is a bit of a learning curve. We do want to run native Kubernetes, but getting there for a lot of these challenge builders is a challenge, not the one they're trying to build. So what is CTD? It's basically a glorified scoreboard with some plugins. Where's my, I'm out of sync. Which is, I'm getting a completely different view than I'm used to. I don't know what's going on here. No, this is one, yeah. So we have a bunch of plugins and that. I'm not going to bother you with the details besides I don't fully understand all of them. I just told these students to build that, and then they went out and did it. So in fact, every tenant has 3 microservices. And of course there's additional stuff that goes into specific challenges. I'm going to skip the plugins because that's not the most important thing for what I'm trying to say right now. How do we host this? Now, Surf, many of you know Surf? You know Surf? Right? Okay, actually I'm going to deliver this talk tomorrow at Surf, which is where I took the opportunity to sort of test drive it here. And they've been really generous by providing us with a bunch of virtual machines, because basically this is a no-budget project. What we did is, or the students did, is create actually a bit more modern than that. This is next slide. We have a 3-node development cluster and a 3-node production cluster and a bunch of other stuff running on Randy Kubernetes engine. And this is something that we go like, we're stuck in upgrading that. Somebody needs to do it, but it's like changing a diaper. I mean, it's a dirty job, but somebody's going to do it. And maybe I'm not want to do that. I'm trying to get the budget to actually run this native Kubernetes. Tell people back home, kids don't do this at home. Like, get a proper Kubernetes provider. It doesn't matter which one. It's better than rolling your own. more important is how do we deploy stuff. So we're actually running GitLab at this point. We're using GitLab CI/CD for a couple of things, for some of the pipelines, like this one. So I'm trying to tell the students whatever I learn in DevOps and all these meetups. And why don't you try this out? What I need is a DevOps pipeline. And they go like, yeah, well, if you say so, let's do it. And then they do it. And it looks like this. And it was fairly reasonable. But then, of course, when we start working, then we're on to the next project. So those are the challenges that I have. But it's still operational, mostly. I just wanted to skip, I think, the venture dashboard we don't use much these days. Longhorn we use for backup and restore. Again, I didn't do much of the detailed analysis yet, so we can discuss the pros and cons of Longhorn over beer. I'll be happy to do so. I actually managed to get this working. There's one system admin right now. That's me, right? And I don't know a lot of this. It really sounds like the story we had earlier. I think I told us about. Yeah, suddenly we have this technology in our portfolio that we actually don't know bit about. Right? How do we do that? I can sympathize with that because that's where I am. Anyway, on top of that, I told these guys I don't want to do any manual scripting. I just want to have full scripts. And so we started doing GitOps, and here you can see some GitOps pipeline that kind of resembles what we're doing, but we moved beyond that, and I told the students, like, go figure out a better solution. I want something like this. I like GitOps, but as a member of the better way, this other CD. And that's what it looks like right now. 1, 2, 3, boom. No? For some reason it takes a while to get going. This one, I think. Is it delayed? That's the problem. I think it's trying to tell me to get a sip of my beer. So, this is what my RCD panel looks like. And the deployment process, let's say I got a new teacher coming in of a random new school. Can I get a fresh CTFD tenant with all the bells and whistles that I want? I said, okay, we can do that. I fill in a couple of parameters in the script. There's a bit of like 5 minutes of TLC around that. And then I hit the deploy and get the sync. And then after a while, after a couple of minutes, it starts spinning. And it creates the whole stuff. And it's brilliant. You can drill down into anything that you want in terms of its health. Because there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, it sounds like 3 basic microservices. How hard can it be? However, they need let's encrypt certificates. They need backup volumes. They need a lot of stuff. And I can't show you that right here. I mean, I could, but we're running out of time. You can drill down into each and every container whether it's working or not. You can reset strings. This is a pretty decent management interface as far as I'm concerned. I'm pretty happy with that. And currently, I don't see any reason to deviate or to get something else. So there's a lot of things I want to tweak about this, but the core approach I really like. Of course, we need to rehost to do a different cluster, but actually I try to do this on a local machine just to try out. I mean, what I want to know is, do the students produce scripts and stuff and repos and things, and it works by a lot of magic and hand waving and hand holding, and then when they're done, can I reproduce it without them being there? That's my major test. And that works. There's a couple of things that, one or two things that I want to add, and then maybe some questions. We do a lot of secrets management. There's actually, in the repos, there are no secrets. We use Doppler.com for that. And I'm pretty pleased with it. It's free. It's a wonderful reason good with it, but it's nice. I mean, it's not overly complicated. It's not like HashiCorp Virtual or whatever. It's nice. Okay, yeah, that's what I want to say. And through the generosity of Alessandro, I can test drive this presentation, and I just want to hand it over for some questions, if any. You must have a question, Alessandro. No, but I have to say yes. is one of the more popular GitHub tools. So, oh, yeah, thank you, Peter. Thank you. You are extremely considerate. That concluded the night. Pretty long. Instead of 2 talks, we got 3 even if one cancelled. So thank you so much for coming. You can grab a pizza on the way out, and we're gonna have another meetup very likely in October. Possibly not here, but also somewhere else. But